Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello, and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to the information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you navigate these sometimes very tricky jungles of being a yoga teacher and also running a small business or a growing business or a large business. That's what I get really excited about. I get excited to help yoga teachers who are ready to take their yoga business and grow it. And this week, we're continuing a conversation from last week's episode about how to get booked as a podcast guest. And this can be part of your marketing strategy. It can be part of growing your business. For myself, I know that podcasts have made a tremendous difference in my own business, and that's why I wanted to share as much as possible in a couple of episodes to help you to do the same. In last week's episode, we gave a lot of tips on how to get on a podcast, and this is a continuation of that. But in this week, I have an expert from the industry, Kelly Glover, to share her expertise on how to get booked on a podcast, because this is the work that she does all the time. Kelly talks to us about how to find the shows your target audience is listening to, how to write an effective pitch. She also explains why you should even be going on podcasts in the first place and why niching down and having a specific area of expertise can really help you. I also really appreciate Kelly's tips on vetting a podcast to know if you are a good fit for that podcast and how to decline being a guest on a podcast that doesn't align with your brand, while at the same time holding on to that connection with the person who reached out to ask you to be on the podcast. So if you have been thinking, how can I get on podcasts to really showcase my yoga offerings, or wondering how to pitch a podcast to even get noticed, this episode and last week's go together so nicely. And after you have a listen to these, you might feel like you want to take it one step further. Last week, I offered a gift on a training that goes deeper into how to pitch podcasts. That's something you might want to take a look at. And also, there's a link that I will make sure is in our show notes where you can see how you can apply to be on the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. All of our show notes are ready for you over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/186, and go back and look at last week's as well, theconnectedyogateacher.com/185, because that's where you can find the special coupon code for the training that I talked about last week. Now, speaking of podcasters, I have a huge thank you to send out to a fellow podcaster, Lisa Garside from the United States. Lisa posted a review, and this is really a fantastic gift to ever give a podcast that you've been listening to for a while. And I'm excited because I got to be on Lisa's podcast. I will make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. And that's a great episode to have a listen to if you want to hear someone asking me some questions. So Lisa really dug in and asked me some questions that I haven't been asked before. So if you want to have a listen to that, the link for that is in the show notes. So Lisa's review was really sweet. She said, "I think I started listening to Shannon after she was a guest on someone else's podcast." See, that's the thing that I want to highlight here today. In today's episode and last week's episode, this is where we form those connections. Okay, so Lisa goes on to say, "She had such a calming voice, was extremely knowledgeable about everything she spoke of, and had a clear, concise way of conveying information. I immediately went over to her podcast and binge listened. They are all so well done. They have a great beginning. The guests are always treated well. She asks great questions and always ends with a recap. She does these for us, for the yoga teachers. The episode notes are so concise that after each one, I go and click on the links, re-listen to what I need to, and usually go follow the guest she has. Now I'm happy to say I'm a member of the Connected Yoga Teacher group, part of her Pelvic Health Professionals membership, and I engage, learn, attend all she offers. She's extremely approachable, and if she doesn't have the answer, she will usually get us the answer, usually in the form of an amazing expert guest. She's a huge resource in the yoga community, and we're so grateful to have her." Thank you so much, Lisa. This is the sweetest review. And It really shows how you heard me on a podcast, on someone else's podcast. You started following my work, started listening to this podcast, and then even signed up to be part of Pelvic Health Professionals. This is why I think this review is the perfect one to use if you're wondering, why should I be on a podcast? And before we dive in a little bit further, I also want to acknowledge that it can feel scary to put ourselves out there and be on a podcast. So this week's episode and last week's will really help you to feel prepared for when you want to do that. And before we meet Kelly, let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga teachers, this is Allison with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Shannon let us know that some of you have been asking about linking Schedulicity with your Google Calendar. Let's walk through that connection now. Once you've logged in with your admin account, head to Settings and open the Providers/Instructors page. Choose your name from the list, and under the Calendar Share header, move that No slider to Yes. Select and copy the full URL that appears in the text field. Next, sign into your Google account and click on the grid box at the top right of the page where you will select the Calendar option. Click on the small plus button on the right of the Add Calendars area. Now, choose the option that says From URL and paste your generated link from Schedulicity there. Click Add Calendar and you're good to go. Google generally pushes their calendar share updates once a day, so you may see up to a 24-hour delay in your schedule changes. Also, keep in mind that this is a one-way share in which your Schedulicity appointments will be visible from your Google Calendar, but not vice versa. You may want to work out of your Schedulicity account to avoid double booking yourself just in case.
Thank you so much, Schedulicity. You do so much work to help us yoga teachers stay organized with our calendars. I am thankful for your service and your team over there who always helps me whenever I have a question. So let's dive in and meet Kelly now. Kelly is the CEO of The Talent Squad, a podcast booking and publicity agency. She has spent almost 2 decades working in media, starting as a Hollywood intern and red carpet interviewer. Get this, Connected Yoga teachers, Kelly has interviewed celebrities like Joaquin Phoenix and John Travolta. And she's worked her way up to become a talent agent, radio host, and podcast producer. Kelly works with clients in person in Newcastle, Sydney, Los Angeles, and New York, and she does both one-on-one personal brand strategy as well as podcast pitching and business model coaching. By using her extensive experience in the industry, Kelly helps her clients get from pitched to published to get more clients and build their brand through podcasting. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Kelly. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Shannon. You sound just like on your podcast. What a shocker. You're a real life person.
Yeah, that's exactly what I sound like. Sometimes I do wonder if I'm slipping into like a podcast voice when I go to podcast. So it's interesting.
Snap out of it. Don't do it. Be your authentic self.
I am excited that we get to talk about podcasts today, specifically how to pitch to a podcast as a yoga teacher. So tell us, what is the work that you do? How did you get into this? How did you even get started with this?
Yeah, so I run the Talent Squad. We're a podcast guest booking agency, and we book podcast tours. So I got into this. I've been in media and entertainment for 19 years. I know, my voice sounds so young. It's impossible, right? I started off as an intern in Hollywood, ended up doing celebrity interviews on the red carpets, was a radio announcer, and then ended up getting into podcasts and booking other people on shows. So, it's been, I suppose it's like yoga teachers where you may not start out being a yoga teacher, but you bring in skills from other areas. So that's what happened to me, and I couldn't be happier. I love it.
That's amazing. So did you always want to be involved in radio or audio or something like this?
Yeah, so I grew up in the 90s, and on TV was Donahue, Ricky Lake, Oprah, Sally Jessy Raphael, and my whole life I basically wanted to be a talk show host, and I loved media, and I knew I wasn't going to be one of those people, but I wanted to be in the area, and I ended up getting in radio and chatting, and in podcasting is pretty much like hosting your own talk show, right? But when I grew up, when I was in high school, podcasting wasn't invented. So thanks, world and technology, for inventing something at the time when I can use it. I really appreciate that.
I know. I love podcasts. Sometimes my kids are like, oh my gosh, shut it off, shut it off. Or they get to know the podcasters, like they know them by their names now.
Yeah, good. Well, I would be encouraging them to make their own podcast.
Yes, they don't want to listen to the same things, but they're teenagers. So this is different. They have to rebel in some way.
Whatever, teens. You know how there's okay boomer? Okay, teens.
Exactly.
That's how I feel.
So if our yoga teacher listeners want to reach out to podcasts to get their business known, their brand known, to be interviewed in some way, can you tell us what are some of the things that they need to think about? First of all, before they even decide, okay, which podcast should I choose? That's like the first question.
Yeah, there's a bunch. So I think hey, I want to get booked on podcasts, how do I do it, is about step 5.
Okay.
And that's where people go. So you need to go all the way back. But first, I'd like to just cover off, if it's okay with you, why you should even go on a podcast. Because we know it's like, okay, great, everyone's into podcasts, it's the thing. But what's the reason why behind it? And then you're doing it for a reason, as opposed to everyone else is doing it, so I feel like I should, and it's something I should be adding another thing to the list of I'm doing it, but I don't really know why. So it's all, and you said it, Shannon, it's about your personal brand. Your personal brand is everything. Being a yoga teacher, you can go to any number of yoga teachers, but why are they coming to you specifically? So yes, you all have a different level of skill, and I completely appreciate that, but you don't know that until you go. So what is going to make somebody go? And it is your personal brand, something they relate to. So the reason is, it actually, being on a podcast is awareness. It also gives you expert status. So that is credibility. It means you're known. It helps with your reputation, your influence. You're accessing audiences that may not already know you. And those audiences are niched audiences, engaged audiences, and they're curated. So someone else has put in years to get all those people to listen to them, to get them on their platform. So you're leveraging somebody else's work. Now, I'll get into a little bit later. That doesn't mean using them. Please don't mistake me. Not using them, but leveraging them. It's also relationship building. That's with the audience and the host. So it's not necessarily just about reaching the people that you don't know. You may never know who's listening. It's also about the host, because there's benefits there in relationships, affiliates, cross promotions. There's all these different things that you can, have a real relationship with the host. The other thing is SEO. Podcasts have show notes. So you're going to get a link back. So that will go to your website. And then when someone's Googling, they may not find you. They may find someone else's podcast. And the gateway to find you could be through an episode they listen elsewhere. So that, and especially if you're doing a bunch of podcasts, say you do one a week, 52 a year, that's 52 little seeds spread around that someone else can find a way for people to find you. The other thing is, it helps with media experience. So the more podcasts you do, the better you get at the message, the more you can understand your own message, which I know sounds funny, but once you get used to answering other people's questions, you start getting asked things you wouldn't expect, even me. And sometimes they'll throw me, but then you better believe that I figure out what I think, what I know, and how to say it after that. It only takes once. So it's practicing your message. And then the other thing, a huge benefit, is time. You can have a Facebook ad, which I was listening to your previous episode with Claire, learning all about Facebook ads, which sounds amazing, by the way. I almost missed this recording because I was so engrossed. I was worried that I might have missed the podcast because I was so engrossed in listening to you in another podcast. So yeah, you can do all those things: blog posts, Instagram, Facebook, videos, and they all have their place, but they're for a short period of time. And it's somebody stumbling across them, as opposed to someone saying, oh, I want to listen to this podcast, and they'll spend 30 to 60 minutes with your voice in their ears. And from that, like, you've listened to me for a few minutes now, you can tell my personality, you can tell the words that I use, you can tell if I'm full of it or if I know what I'm talking about. You are going to judge me, and you either think, oh my God, she's too high energy, won't stop talking, I hate her, which is fine, or she's amazing, I want to work with her, I want to go to her website and find out more stuff.
Exactly.
which is perfect because either way, we all win. If you don't
Yes.
want to hear, if you're not interested in me, that's great. Perfect. Because I don't want to be average where, oh, she's nice and you don't visit me, or, like you don't want to be in the middle. You want to be on either side. So those are the benefits of why you should even consider being on a podcast.
I'm so curious then, once you decide, because those are amazing benefits. If our yoga teachers weren't thinking about being on a podcast, now I'm sure that they are like, okay, now what do I do? Now I know all of the benefits of being on a
Yeah.
podcast. What's next?
So now you need to think, you need to start with the end in mind. Who do I want to talk to and what do I want them to do as a result of hearing me on the show? Because you know all the benefits and the intentions and you're like, yeah, I'm all in, because that's important to be all in. So you need to figure that out, because you can pitch a podcast, get on a podcast, but it takes a lot to find that show, vet that show, write your pitch, send it in. So you don't want to spend time pitching the wrong show, and you don't want to go on a show, not be prepared, do all that work, and then waste the opportunity. So it's really important to know who you're talking to, what they want, and what you're bringing to the show, because it's not about, hey, I want to get on your show. I want to be interviewed. It's actually about knowing the audience and what value you're delivering that audience, because podcasts are a way for you to teach the audience and what is it that you're teaching. So you need to go, and we'll get to that in the pitching, but it's important to know those things before you even send the pitch.
Yeah. I feel like for my first little bit, when I was invited on different podcasts, people would ask me about topics and I'd think, yeah, I can talk about that. But now I feel much more clear on, here are the topics I want to talk about. Like basically two things now. I want to talk about niching down and pelvic health, specifically with yoga. And I want to talk about them because those things lead to the work that I'm doing now. It's like those are my two favorite topics. Do you recommend doing this, or should we be
Yeah.
able to talk about anything?
No, I think you absolutely must niche down, and you must speak only of what you know. Like, don't go into something that you don't know, because you'll be exposed really quickly, and also you'll be half-assed about it and you just won't be into it. The thing is, yes, so before you even do the pitch, so we know the benefits of podcasts, we know who we want to talk to and what we want them to do as a result. But in regards to picking your I call it extracting your expertise, because sometimes we're such an expert in something, we don't really know what that is or what people want to hear, or it comes so easily to us, we don't recognize that, oh, people want to know about that. That's like breathing. I don't even know that I'm doing it. I do that. So you've got to figure out what your expertise is, who wants to hear it, what they can do with it. So you need to get your online press kit in order. So you need to kind of unpack your expertise and IP, and then repackage that into topics, talking points, hooks, subjects, lines to send to the media. So it really is going into your brain, going into your purpose, and putting that into words so you can pitch it in a nice, neat package. Because when a host or producer receives that, they don't know all the stuff that goes with it. They're just running their eye across one line to make a decision. And the decision isn't necessarily, I'm going to book them on a podcast. The decision is, I'm going to vet them. So that's the thing that people need to know. It's the pitch isn't the getting the booked. It is actually the gateway to getting vetted to see if the host will book you. So you need to have your talking points. And again, like a topic is yoga. A topic is pelvic health, like you said, but that's not a talking point, because you need to go deeper. And the talking point will have, think about those headlines. Is it on the front of a newspaper? Is it a clickbait that actually, I call it clickbait that actually delivers? Like, oh, I'm really interested in that. But the trick is you've got to have the answer to it, because so many times we click those things and you're like, oh God, there was nothing in there. It was one tiny point and I feel so ripped off. You cheat. I fell for it. You don't ever want anyone to feel like they fell for something. You want them to be rewarded and be like, yes, I got the prize. So it's figuring out your topics, your talking points, turning them into hooks or clickbait that actually delivers, putting them in subject lines, because as you would know, Shannon, you get pitched all the time. If that subject line isn't good, your email ain't even going to get open, right?
I know. It does
If
happen.
if you go inside, it's not well written, or you just come in and go, hey, I want to be on your show and here's everything awesome about me, you're not going to get to the next step. So it's having a one sheet, an online press kit, a pitch, and all the little elements. And that's what makes up your pitch.
Yeah, I really personally, as a podcaster, I like to go and find my guests. So almost like it's a game to find the people. Very seldom do I take someone who pitches me, but every once in a while, it's like they've listened to the show. I can tell that they know what we talk about. They know my audience really well. And then they give me a topic that says, you haven't covered this on your podcast yet, or you covered it kind of, but here's a new spin on it. Those ones will catch my attention. A lot of them, though, we just them in the, we have a list. We'll add it to the list. Like we put it over in a folder that honestly we barely ever go look at.
Yeah, that sounds like if we're really desperate, we'll pick one of these people lists. Like that's what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
And I think the important thing there is you said they look at the show and they find the gaps in what we've covered and add to that or fill that gap. So you're looking for the white space. When you as a yoga teacher are looking for a show to pitch, you're also competing against the back catalog. So if someone has come on and spoken about something that you speak about, you can't go and offer the same thing. You need to you can have the same expertise, but you need to offer a different angle. Or look for what is nobody talking about but should be. That's what I look for, white space. Now, maybe there's a reason they're not talking about it. Avoid that like anyone's beeswax. But maybe you found an opportunity. Go there. So it's being very intentional, being very thoughtful. And in that pitch, just know you're there for the audience, not for yourself and not for the host. So there's actually a few people in that relationship that you may not know. If you think about a pitch, there's the host whom you're pitching, you're speaking to them, but you're actually pitching to the audience. So that's where the content and intention is going. So there's you, the host, and the audience in that transaction. And the pitch is in the middle of that. If it's a Venn diagram, the pitch is actually in the middle of that. So I think and you don't know until you know, do you? Until you figure it out. Like you would just think, oh, I want to come on the show. Here's why I'm awesome. Please have me. And I get that.
Yes. And that's the other thing. I love how you bring that up because some people will send me kind of, here's why I'm awesome. It feels like that's the email. I've listened to your show, or maybe they haven't. And they send me a really impressive kind of CV or resume, but still I don't know what the topic is. And it just takes me too long to figure out, have you listened to the show? Are you really going to show up and serve our audience?
What benefit are you giving my audience, and what will they learn by the end of the episode that they didn't know in the beginning? And why are you the person to teach my audience that? Mm-hmm. That's the way those are the questions. A lot of this is reverse engineering. Really, it's starting with the end in mind and asking yourself the questions. So Shannon, tell me more about, like you get pitched a lot. What do you love? What do you hate? How many times do you get pitched? Like, how do you like to be pitched? Because you have a great show with a great audience. You've spent a lot of time curating it and you've seen a lot of stuff.
The pitches that work really well are oftentimes someone saying, you know what, I listened to your podcast. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm an avid listener. And here's a guest that I think would be amazing. That one will usually catch my attention. And they'll tell me why that person is amazing. And it's not that person telling me. So that's one that works really well. Another thing that catches my attention is if someone goes the extra step, like making a video or really outlining why they think this topic is needed for yoga teachers. Like if they know my audience well, how often do we get pitched is a great question. I wouldn't say it's once a day, but it's definitely multiple times a week. Mm-hmm. And some of them are, honestly, what really bothers me sometimes is getting pitched by a third party. So that person has hired a company to pitch for them. And sometimes I've been like, yes, I would actually love to talk to that guest, but they don't fill out our form. They don't follow our process then.
That's really important because obviously I run a podcasting agency and one of my bookers pitched me. So I'm a result of a third party pitch. So don't let that put you off. And if you are using a VA or someone in your team, just make sure they know what they're doing. So there's a lot of ways to do it as long as it's done correctly. So, and some shows will not take third party at all. And like you said, you prefer direct, which is fine. And in knowing that, even if you have someone working for you, Shannon's just indicated, do it yourself. Send that personal email, and that's fine too.
Well, the third party one, I don't mind. It's like until they don't, like, let's say this person, I was super excited. I wanted to have her on the podcast. I actually almost reached out to her and said, I don't think this company is working effectively for you, because the pitch came through and we have this system, like, fill out the form, then we'll book you. And they booked and didn't fill out the form, and they just kind of left it up to the potential guest. But that person is busy. That's why they hired a third party.
Yeah. So I think this is what you're saying is the way I equate it is you're a guest in someone else's house. You've asked to go to their party, and and if they're saying you got to take your shoes off at the door, it's a shoes off house and you need to take your shoes off. So you always must follow the host's rules because you are a guest in their house. And if someone doesn't follow the rules, the booking isn't a given. Even the recording isn't a given. So you are not in control, and you don't get to say, this isn't paid. This is not an advertisement. It's earned media for a reason. You have to earn it, and you need to follow the rules.
Yeah. I have a question for you. When you said vet in two different ways: vet the podcast, and also if you're a podcast host, you need to vet the person. How do we know? Like, if we listen to one or two episodes of a podcast, if I take the time to do that and I really get to know, like, and trust this podcast, I get that. But what if I'm busy, or what if I hire a third party to do that for me? How do we vet them then?
If you're pitching a show, if you're a guest wanting to be on a show.
Yes.
So it's actually a two-way vetting process, because you need to figure out, am I good enough for that show? But also, is the show good enough for me? Because you may want to be on this show, but you may not be good enough to be on the show yet. Like, I would love to be on the Tim Ferriss show. It's a non-yoga show. But
Right.
If his last guest was Oprah and Gary Vaynerchuk and Tony Robbins, I'm not in that league, And if they're all talking about mindset and I talk about booking podcasts, that kind of has nothing to do with that show. So you need to because if you pitch a show before you're ready, or incorrectly, that you're not a fit, it's actually damaging your personal brand, because it shows that you're not self-aware. So self-awareness in pitching is really important.
Oh, I like this
So
a lot.
that's you vetting the show. Like, are you good enough for the show? It doesn't mean you're not good, but it just means, are you at the level? Like, I might want to play in the NBA, but I'm really at a backyard level. Doesn't mean I won't get there one day. Doesn't mean I won't be on Tim Ferriss one day, but just not today.
Right.
So it's having that level of self-awareness, and then knowing if the show's good enough for you. Listen to an episode. How many episodes? Are they at episode 2? Are they at episode 200? Then looking at the back catalogue, listening to the audio. Is the host, are you a fit? Do they use lots of swear words and that fits with your brand or doesn't fit with your brand? Are they a super fast shotgun talker and you speak really slow? Like, there's a bunch of ways to figure out if you fit in if the show is a good fit for you. Also, who is the audience, which we've spoken about? That should be the first one. What are the topics that they cover on the show? And then the other element is, so you figured all that out. There's so many. I'm trying to think about all the, because I just do it in one step. So I'm looking at the artwork, looking at the episode titles, having a listen to it. I'm looking at the show. What's their social following? Does my social following go with them? Like, you kind of do it all in one whip around that you don't even know that you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yes. So the other one is, when's their last episode? Because often you'll find a show that is the Cinderella perfect ruby slipper or glass slipper, whatever thing, and they might not have had a show for 2 years. Or they might not have guests. They might just speak to them, be a solo show, or they might have co-hosts. So there's a lot of, it's like one of those, those things where you have to draw around on the piece of paper and then you hit a dead end. It's not a finder word, whatever those little things are.
The
and you
maze.
go down that
Yes.
a maze. Yes, a maze. Hello, a maze. it's like drawing on one of those mazes, and then you think you're there, dead end. You think you're there, dead end. So you've got to get through that maze. And when you get to the other side, that's the one that you should pitch.
That's my one pet peeve about podcasts. I think that they should not show up on search if they have not had an episode for a certain amount of time. I don't even want to see them pop up.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to source, vet, and pitch. And one thing that you did say in there, Shannon, was the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and you must accept that if you pitch a show, you may never hear back from them. But don't just pitch once and then not follow up. Often at the Talent Squad, we're an agency, we pitch people all the time. Most of our bookings come from the follow-up, not from the first one. Right. So you must have your systems and processes in place to track that, because if you send 50 pitches out, if you don't have a little grid, so I sent that on Monday the 1st, you're never going to know where you are, and you're never going to know your pitch rate, and you might end up pitching the same person because you forgot, and that looks bad. So it's making sure you've got that tracking process in place for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. You also talked about knowing the audience. I think this is super important. My audience is yoga teachers. So if someone asked me to be on a podcast for dentists, I'd be like, no, that's not my audience.
Yeah. And it's okay to turn down a podcast if you do it in the correct way. You don't have to show up to every single party you are invited to. If that party is a grill out and you're a vegan, you're not the right person, and thanks for the invitation. But what you should do is offer an alternative. I'm not great on this, but you know who is? Bob. He'd be brilliant. So it's podcasting, and being a guest and a host is a giving mentality, not a taking mentality. And it's actually about your personal brand instead of selling product. So often people will come and say, I'm an author, I want to promote my book. Here's a newsflash. Ain't nobody caring about your book. They're there to learn something, unless you're a celebrity, and then I want to find out because it's associated with the person. But otherwise, I want to find out what's in the book and you happen to be the person that wrote the book. So yes, you are the best person to deliver that message, but it's not about the book. It's about the content in the book and what that is doing for the audience.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So many yeses about this.
It sounds like hard truth. And I hope my voice doesn't sound mean, which is something that, that imposter syndrome, I always get worried about that, but it's really helpful, because then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. It's not about me and I wrote a book. It's about the stuff that I can do. I get it. So it's just about different frames, different perspectives, and repositioning and then pitching it out. I mean, you still want to get a book, you still want to get on a podcast and tell people about the content of your book, but it's about you and your personal brand as the person delivering that message.
How do we know when we should be pitching ourselves to a podcast, or if we should hire something like the Talent Squad?
I think that it depends on your time and your budget and how much effort you want to put in and where you are at your journey. If you're not really sure and you're and where you are in your business. So do you have a launch? Like we were saying, do you have a book? Is it an ongoing strategy? And how willing are you to go all in on this strategy? Because if you don't have the call to action and what's happening on the other side set up and are willing to do the promotion of the show, the leveraging of the show, and the reworking of the content into other content, then it's not going to pay off and you'll be hugely disappointed. So it's being prepared to do all the aspects of it. And then, because getting the interview is just part of it. So if you want to do it yourself, fine. But if you want to take time and outsource it and just do all the other stuff and show up, that's when you should get an agency.
Right. I think it is so much easier sometimes to think about other people pitching you as well, because they will, hopefully, if a company is good, they would pull the information out that a podcast is looking for and then pitch that to them. And sometimes that imposter syndrome kicks in and we feel like, ooh, I don't know about pitching that. So this is really handy to know.
There's a reason that The Rock has an agent. He doesn't call up and say, hey, can I be in that movie? So sometimes it's the reputation of the agency. And also that agency has been pitching thousands of podcasts. That's all they do every day. And they don't have to look through. Like if I'm talking about yoga podcasts, we already know what's the good podcasts, the ones that are coming through. We've got it on our radar to see what's coming up. So those 20, 30, 40, however many hours you want to spend looking for shows, we've already done that work and we know what are the good shows. And we may have already booked a client on there. So then our work is in packaging you and getting your one sheet ready, your online press kit ready, and positioning you and finding out what you want to be able to connect you with those shows.
Right.
It doesn't mean we don't take it, by the way, just because a agency has pitched a show and gotten guests on in the past, it's not a given. It's still up to each individual host, and you may or may not get on that show, but it's clicking 10 steps ahead instead of starting from, a dirt patch building a house. Like we've already got the framework up there. You know what I mean?
Yes. You know what you're doing. That's great. And so once we get on a show, what are the rules around? So I've had guests who have said, hey, I have this freebie for your listeners. And if you go to blah, 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 their website /yoga or connected or whatever, then you'll get this freebie, which I know they're using to build their email list. And if it's a valuable enough offer, I let them do that. Is there a rule around, or do you have some guidelines around here's how to know if this is building your business and here's how to build your email list with it?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to you're a guest in somebody else's house. So I would always ask before I decided to say a lead magnet. Now, the common path is hosts will at the end of the show say, how can people find you? And is there, and that's when you'd say yes, and I've also got this thing. So it's asking permission up front. Usually they'll say yes. If they say no, then you respect that. There's still benefits. And then I would always have your call to action as one thing. People are on the phone, they're on the treadmill, they're in the car on the way to school with their kid. When I said that, I meant their kid driving their kids to school, not they're on the way to school, by the way. So they're doing other things. And if you're like, go to my Instagram, go to my website, and I've got to download. And by the way, I'm never going to remember that. So what I will probably remember is your name or your business name. I'm not going to remember the 7 steps to blah, blah, blah lead magnet. So just stick to one call to action that is easy for people to remember, simple for them to do. It could even be go to my LinkedIn, because you can search a name on LinkedIn, or join a Facebook group. So whatever it is, stick to that. And with podcasts, if you want to use the dating scenario, like don't ask me to marry you. I've just met you. Like maybe we should go on a second date first. And again, if I've just met you, I probably want to get into your ecosystem. If you're going to make me jump through a hoop, like we're all wise to the lead magnets, and they're probably going to put in a fake address just so they can get the thing.
Right.
So it's not going to be like, and again, reverse engineer. Like, how do you deal with it when you hear that stuff? If you just want to be like, well, I just want to test it out first. I just want to see what I actually think of the person. So I would make it super easy. If you are doing a lead magnet, it depends on the business and who you're talking to. Yeah, just have a specific strategy with each.
Right. This is
and
good.
even talk to the host. What does your audience want? You can make something specifically for that audience.
Yes.
And the host may put it in the show notes. You know what I mean? So then it's like, do you like the person? Are you in the ecosystem? Because as we know, with the whole marketing and the steps and all that kind of stuff, people want 7 to 14 steps. I don't even know where these stats come from, before they decide to do the thing.
Yes.
So what is the thing you want them to do? Realize the steps that are in there. And then when you're doing your call to action and or lead magnet, just reverse engineer and think, would I do this if I heard someone else, and have a giving mentality instead of I need this name on my list so I can have 502 people instead of 500 people. So I realize I've asked a million questions back at you, and that may be not what you want to hear, but it is individual and it is an intentional, thoughtful process.
Yeah, I love all of the intention and thought that goes in behind it. Is there anything else that you can think of that you would share? Maybe you wish that you would have known along the way, or you're thinking about our yoga teachers who might go out and pitch podcasts. Any other tips that you would offer to them?
Sometimes with lead magnets, I just like to go back to that for a second. If you think about it, podcasts are audio. And if you're listening to me right now, you don't know what I look like. You have no idea. So sometimes the lead magnet can actually be visual. So if I said to you, and this is actually true, I've lost, I can speak to you in kilos, fantastic. I've lost 100 kilos, 200 pounds, which is true. Now that's a visual. And then I said, go to thetalentsquad.com and you'll see a before and after. You're more likely to want to do that than download a free thing. So for yoga teachers, it could be come and see this pose, or I went to this really cool, I know you have retreats and things, come and see the retreat of where we went, or we had this amazing breakfast and this is the smoothie we made, or whatever the thing is. You've piqued my curiosity. You've put a picture in my head. I really need to know the answer. I'm going to get payoff when I get there. And I would much rather see that smoothie and a sunset than download the free 7 things. So sometimes the lead magnet can be something else, or, I really want to see this pose that she does that's different, or her studio, or sometimes it can be that. And then it's just it's just opening an invitation in the door, and then the person will decide again. They're going to like you or they're going to not, and they're going to want to more of your stuff or they're not. That's it.
That's fantastic. I listen to the Every Little Thing podcast. I love it. And I learn stuff all the time, and they'll say, if you want to see this, whatever they're talking about, go on over to our Instagram. And I started following them because I would like stop what I was doing, make sure I went over to see, because I'd even pause the podcast to go see the thing. Yeah.
Is it worth me stop doing my thing to get on my phone and press buttons to go and find you? We are all very lazy. This is some hard truths, because you're like, can I be bothered? Nah, I'll flip the channel. You know what I mean? Do I want to see someone that lost 100 kilos? What do I think she looks like? Yeah, I'll go and do, that's all of us in real life. Like we can have all this theory that we want, but as everyday people, what are we doing? What are we doing? That's the truth, Otherwise, it's just theoretical.
Yes. Many times I will hear podcasts over and over again telling me about their freebie, and it might take like 30 or 40 episodes or years for me to go over and check out that lead magnet.
Yeah. Like, here's the time my cat fell in a blue swimming pool. Oh my God, I need to see that fluffy blue cat.
Right. Right. You're right.
Yeah. Now that lead magnet may well change my life, but damn it, I'll go after that fluffy blue cat. Thanks very much.
How much of your day is spent listening to podcasts? That's a curiosity question. And what are your favorite ones to listen to?
I have listened to thousands of podcasts. And as we were saying before I came on this, and any good guest will do this as well, you listen to the host podcasts. Now, the problem with that is you get sucked in, like I did with yours with that Facebook episode. So I listen to shows that I'm going on, obviously, to shows that I'm sourcing and vetting for clients. And then I'm the same as any other podcast listener. When I'm in the car, I'm listening for something that I want to learn. So ones that I love, or inspirational stories from people that have done it to get little nuggets. And this is a super famous podcast, but How I Built This is a personal favorite.
Yeah. That's a good one.
If you want to learn business, then Startup is also another really great one.
Do you mean by Gimlet?
Yes, yeah. So they're super famous. They're super famous ones, but they are for a reason. And those are the ones that I like and recommend.
Yes. I love some Gimlet podcasts for sure. They're one of my favorites. And I'm kind of sad that Startup is done now.
I know.
There's lots to go back and listen to if you haven't ever listened to it.
But there's a podcast for everything, guys. There's a podcast for escalators. If you want to know all about escalators, there's a podcast for that. So whatever your niche is and your interest, there is a podcast for that.
Yes. I was listening to our editor tell me some of the podcasts that she edits, and I was like, wow, there really is a podcast for everything.
What are your top ones, Shannon? What have you listened to and loved? And what are you listening to at the moment? And what are you looking for?
What's surprising to me is My Favorite Murder is one of my top podcast listens. My brother got me onto that. It's a comedy podcast about murder. I like
Oh, it sounds hilarious. No,
I know.
I'm kidding. It's a super famous, podcast, true crime. Yeah.
And he got me hooked on that. That's another show that will say, go back to our Instagram if you want to see the photos, because they do live shows and show photos as they go.
Also, referrals. What you've just said is referrals. People find podcasts from referrals.
Yes. All the time. Those are oftentimes, I love business podcasts. I have so many. Claire, who you listen to, she has the Get Paid podcast. I love hers because she is super honest about struggling to ask the money questions, but she digs in and asks them. Courage and Clarity by Steph Crowder is another favorite of mine. And the other thing is I find podcasts through podcasts, right?
Yeah. And that's part of the podcasting guest strategy as well. If you're on a show and you like someone, I'm more likely to go and listen to them on another show than I am to do that lead magnet. Like with Claire, I instantly liked her. I trust what she said. I was telling you how podcasts really do work for me.
Yeah.
So I want to, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to the rest of that episode. I'll probably go to her website and then I'm going to listen to some more podcasts. So when I reverse engineer, that's how I do it.
Yes.
And same with you. You've got your brother's referral. So everyone has their own ways.
And it's fun when you can talk to your friends and they've both listened to the same podcast, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, did you hear this thing? It's kind of like when you watch a TV show and then you can talk to people about what you liked about that show.
Absolutely.
News,
yes.
I prefer to get my news in the morning, so it's not going to get me down, and I want it to be super fast. So I listen to the Newsworthy, which is US based.
Yeah.
And then because News is a Canadian show that's comedy about the news. Yeah, it's kind of like the NPR something.
I'm like, will there be some fun Harry and Meghan drama on that show? Because I'm all about, I'm Australian, so Commonwealth, yay for us. It's like the best TV drama ever. Like The Crown, sorry, you've got competition of the real life that you're basing your show on. I get that it's meta, but it's the best thing ever.
Yes. Yeah, that one's a really good one, Because News. It's hilarious.
Even the title, Because News. Perfect.
Oh, it's good. You get to hear about US news as well, which is fun from a comedy. Because someone was asking me, what do you think about this in the US news? I was like, have a listen to the show, because I don't really want to get into it like in a Facebook post, but instead go listen to one of my favorite podcasts.
So referrals work, because you better believe I'm going to be listening to that immediately after this recording. Immediately.
Yeah. How can our yoga teachers get in touch with you if they think, you know what? I really want to work with Kelly and find out how she can help to pitch me to podcasts.
TheTalentSquad.com. That's my website. Have a look around, see what you think. And also there's a lot of resources there in just the blog section. As you can tell from me, I put it really simple and I just give you all the facts and what I really think. So that will help you if there's a lot of information we've spoken about, if you just want to read some stuff and break it down to learn some more information. Come and check me out. See if you like me and you want to go on a second date. TheTalentSquad.com.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And I'm going to listen to Because News.
Alrighty, connected yoga teachers. I want to hear from you. What were your key takeaways with today's episode listening to Kelly? Thank you again, Kelly. You had so much information to share. And one thing I really want to highlight, I have a few key takeaways here. I mean, I learned so much from Kelly. One of the things that I've learned as a podcaster is that self-promotion is never the easiest job on the list. I think it's the same with anything. Even when we're going to promote our yoga classes or a new offering that we have, it's harder for us to get excited and talk about our offerings more so than someone else doing it. And so there are times where I sit back and look at what would it look like if I had someone else helping me to pitch to podcasts. And you might be in the same boat. You might do a little hybrid. You might do the research on your own on the podcast that you want to be on, really have a listen, choose those. We talked a lot about that last week in the podcast with the two Amandas, Mado and I. Or your schedule might be so full that it is time to hire someone like Kelly or someone from Kelly's team. And the other key takeaway that I want to share with you today is how Kelly did the follow-up with me. So there was this weird glitch thing that happened with Zoom, and I lost some audio, and I thought I wouldn't be able to recover it. It had to do when Zoom did a big update, and Kelly's audio was part of that. And I actually thought, oh gosh, I've lost the whole thing. And Kelly reached out to me and did a follow-up email. And I am sure she is on a lot of podcasts, so she must have a system where she, has some type of a spreadsheet or something where she's checking in with the podcasts that she has been a guest on. This is a key takeaway for me because I try and promote those podcasts that I have been a guest on. But I don't have like a master spreadsheet showing all of those episodes that I've been a part of. So this is something that I would like to add into my own business. And as you go forward and start to pitch podcasts, keep a list somewhere, a really detailed, organized list. And when you get on that podcast, make sure to save the link to that episode and then share it out there. Another key takeaway that I've learned over the years is that I kind of wish that I had established my niche a little bit more before I went on podcasts. And I say this because I did some episodes on different topics that, yes, I knew about, but were not the things that I get really excited to talk about. So there's two sides to this. I'm actually not sure if it's even possible to just like go out there and have your niche absolutely clear, have your specialty all laid out. That might not be possible. What I really loved, what Kelly said, was gives you a great way to practice your message, doing podcasts. Other ways to practice your message are in Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives, different ways where you can talk to your audience, maybe using video, maybe using audio. So until you get on those podcasts, practice that in other ways. This is what I did before I started the podcast. Way back in episode 5, you'll hear my business coach, Natalie Ekdahl, coaching me along, just gearing up to start a podcast. If you have questions beyond last week's episode and this week's episode, and you want to dig in and talk about your own strategy of getting on podcasts or maybe starting your own podcast, reach out to me and book a consultation call. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, you can look for Work with Shannon on there, and it'll show you all of the information, the form to fill out, and the different options of working with me one-on-one. These calls are done on Zoom. I like to record the audio so that you have that to refer back to. And we really dig in and get a lot of work done in that hour-long call. Also, as I encouraged last week, Connected Yoga Teachers, if you are on a podcast or if you are pitching a podcast, I'd love to hear about it. Share with us in the show notes. Go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/186. and tell us what podcast you were on. Tell us what it's been like to put yourself out there, pitch podcasts. Maybe you've already been on different podcasts and people have found you that way. Share your success stories. We would love to hear that. And a little update about me before I sign off today. I just want to tell you that I'm able to sit up in my office today. It has been quite a journey. For those of you who have been listening in, I have a herniated disc at my L4 and L5. And it is a lot of rest and recovery time for me. I think the most challenging thing is that I have so many ideas swirling in my mind, and I have to come back to a place of breath, patience, rest, just self-care to like the absolute max, it feels like, and let a lot of those ideas just go by the wayside. There are times where I don't even feel like I can write them down. I can't sit up to write them down or write on my computer. So it has been a learning experience. I did a course back in the summer on pain science, and I feel like this is a whole different level of study of pain science. I have an amazing team. I have an amazing support system. Sean has been just amazing. He told me that my one job is to rest. And I'm really thankful that I can still do the podcast and reach out and connect with all of you in this time. I also want to give a huge shout out to our team, Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead, who have just constantly been saying, how can we support you? What else can we do for our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners and our Facebook group? And so often, almost every podcast, I end the same way, asking you what you will be doing this week to stay connected. And I would love to encourage you to find some time for yourself, for self-care. I feel like if I would have added in a little more self-care or listened to the subtle messages that were coming in, I could have avoided all of this resting time. So I want to know, connected yoga teachers, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?